Hey friends, my name is Marty Scoveland Jr., and this is the Marty Party.
It's a Marty Party.
All right, today we've got a lot to talk about. We're going to be covering Venezuela, Iran, Greenland, ICE operations in Minneapolis, the Minnesota Vikings, and top it all off, a little bit of millennial nostalgia. Let's get this party started. All right, so getting right into it, I got to say, first of all, I typically want these going out every Thursday. I want to give all of you that are tuning in for this a little bit of predictability in the schedule. And the goal is every Thursday. This is coming out on Saturday night because when I recorded round one of this, that's right, round one, for some reason, I had some technical difficulties that I didn't realize, and none of the audio captured. I had all of the video, but none of the audio. So that was a real bummer. Didn't realize that until after I'd already recorded what ended up being 1 hour and 41 minute episode that I felt like kind of nailed every point I was hoping to make, and it was going to be really good for all of you. Unfortunately, when things go wrong, they go wrong, and all you can do is react, right? So, and really, hey, every Thursday, that's all. What I just said is just an excuse, right? Excuses are like assholes. Everybody's got one. So, is what it is. We're marching on, and we're gonna get right into it. So, getting into the news, it's been a busy news week. All right, we kind of kick everything off with the daring special operations raid into Caracas, Venezuela last weekend. Wow, I think that kind of took everybody by surprise, and certainly took the illegitimate president of Venezuela, Maduro, took him by surprise for sure, I think. So a lot of people have a lot of opinions on this, and predictably it kind of falls along political lines, right? Like if you're a Republican or pro-Trump a person, you're very excited about this. And if you're a Democrat or anti-Trump person, you're very against this, right? And predictably, that's how most of these things go, is people kind of just side with whatever side that they're on. And then there is notably the Venezuelans, who are very happy about this, very, very happy about this. But, how did we get here? How did we get to going in and doing another regime change, flying into another country's military base to capture their president, their sitting freaking president? Like, pretty insane. So how did we get here? Well, if you've been paying attention at all, this administration has been talking a lot about the Monroe Doctrine, right? And we can go all the way back to December 2025, all the way. I know that was like 2 weeks ago, but in December 2025, President Trump said, and this is a quote here: "The United States will never waver in defense of our homeland, our interests, or the well-being of our citizens. Today, my administration proudly reaffirms this promise under a new Trump corollary to the Monroe Doctrine, that the American people, not foreign nations nor globalist institutions, will always control their own destiny in our hemisphere." So, the Monroe Doctrine, right? Like, what is that? If the president's bringing it up and maybe you're not super familiar with it, this has been almost a week since the Maduro raid, so maybe you've heard the word or the term tossed around a little bit. The Monroe Doctrine goes back about 200 years, actually, 200 years and some change. And it was obviously named after President James Monroe. He was the 5th president of the United States. He introduced this concept that he called the Monroe Doctrine during an otherwise, was considered a pretty routine annual message that he would give to Congress. And that was on December 2nd, 1823. And I want to pause right there real quick. And if you're already sort of rolling your eyes at like, okay, so we're using this 200 plus year old document or doctrine to justify things in 2026, like what's going on? Well, I would argue that there's a lot of old things that are still very relevant. I'm a big fan of the United States Constitution and the Bill of Rights therein, and that is, even older than the Monroe Doctrine. I'm a fan of the Magna Carta. I'm a fan of the Bible. I'm a fan of all sorts of things that are really old documents that's still very, very relevant. So I think you should judge the Monroe Doctrine on the merits of what it's saying, not on just the fact that it's old. And so, continuing on with, what this doctrine is, right? It was President Monroe was warning European powers against further colonization in the Western Hemisphere. He wanted to assert that the region was no longer open to the old world conquests that were happening. And he didn't want European or other powers' influence in that region. He wanted it regarded as a sphere for the United States. That this was our backyard. Central and South America was in the Western Hemisphere, our backyard, and we don't want anybody else messing around with it. That's what the Monroe Doctrine was. This doctrine has been used by at least 9 different U.S. presidents, at least, right? And that includes Theodore Roosevelt and John F. Kennedy. And then more recently, Reagan, Trump, I think Bush Sr. used it, all sorts of different people. And I think it's, and it's been used to justify a lot of different interventions that we've had through Central and South America. It's something that has greatly impacted countries in Central and South America and the people that live there. And a lot of the things that are the way they are right now are because of things the United States did under the guise of the Monroe Doctrine over the years. Just as a side note, if you ever want some fascinating reading, go to CIA.gov and search their archives with the term Guatemala. Man, they did some crazy stuff back in the 50s and 60s. So more contemporarily, though, the Monroe Doctrine under the Obama administration, Secretary of State John Kerry had declared that, quote, the era of the Monroe Doctrine is over. And I believe that was in 2015. And that was, I think, said shortly after President Trump had first declared his candidacy for the 2016 presidential election. So interesting timing there. Another thing that you might be hearing a lot about, like obviously that the quote that I gave you from President Trump to open this, that he called his take on the Monroe Doctrine the Trump corollary. Well, there was previously the Roosevelt corollary. All right. This was triggered by, this is obviously under President Theodore Roosevelt. It was triggered by European naval blockades of Venezuela in 1902 and threats against the Dominican Republic. The U.S. wanted to keep European powers out and secure stability. And notably, Roosevelt declared the U.S. would use force to correct, quote, flagrant cases of wrongdoing or impotence in the region. So the Roosevelt corollary is really where we see the justification for using force to exert our power and influence in Latin America. And this was a little bit of an escalation of the Monroe Doctrine, I believe. Not that force hadn't been used prior to this, but this was definitely another step at the time. Like the Monroe Doctrine with John Kerry saying that it was no more. FDR, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, officially rolled back the Roosevelt corollary because of his good neighbor policy in 1934. And, when we think about this, the justifications, the Trump corollary, the justifications for using the Monroe Doctrine in modern times, those are definitely up for debate, right? I think that it's a good debate to have. There's a lot of good reasons to keep our influence and exert power in this region and make sure other foreign powers are not exerting influence and using it as a base of operations in our own backyard. I think there's a lot of good arguments there. And then there's some other questions about, hey, should we be more concerned about things here at home, or is it worth the money? Is the juice worth the squeeze, or is it leaving us open to potential new forever wars like Iraq and Afghanistan? There's a lot of valid questions that should be debated. When we go back to 1823, when it was first signed, though, think about the threat that was there, right? Like for President Monroe, this is 1823. This is only 13 years after the War of 1812, where we had to prove it that we're seriously, guys, we're independent. We're our own country now. And, the Brits burned our White House down and all that sort of stuff. This is still, Monroe was one of the founding fathers. This is still in the lifetime of people that fought for their independence from a European superpower. And so by establishing this doctrine, it was like, hey guys, yeah, you not only can you not have United States, you're also not going to mess around with all this other stuff in our own backyard to corner us. No, this is our corner of the world, right? And you better stay out. That's what the intent of this was. And when you look at Central and South America, there's a lot of reason that European powers had a vested interest there. There's a reason today that places like Russia and China and Iran have a vested interest in places like Venezuela in the wider Central and South American region. Like, there's a reason we want to protect those things, and we want to be the main influence, not Russia or China. So I think when we look at the different reasons for doing this, right? Like, why take Maduro? Well, simply, it kills multiple birds with one stone. Most importantly, it denies access to resources to our major adversaries. It makes critical impacts to their economy and their ability to flex power. And I'm specifically talking about Russia and China. I think China, 14% of their oil imports are from Venezuela. That just got taken off the map. If you don't think that that's going to affect China and their economy and their stability, you're crazy. Like, that is a big chunk that's going to make prices skyrocket. Like, that sucks for them. And for Russia and some of the things that they're doing, and even Iran doesn't import their oil, but Iran uses it as a base for them to train terrorist organizations. They use their banks to siphon money to these different illegitimate organizations. Like, Iran has a lot of influence there. I mean, look at Maduro himself. Like, the guy was an evil guy. Not popular. I mean, he ran Venezuela into the ground over the past 25 years. There's a reason there's 7.9 million Venezuelans that had to flee that country. They didn't want to leave. The things got really bad. Food prices skyrocketed. Inflation was through the roof. They couldn't afford anything. Violence and particularly political violence got, really out of hand very quickly. Maduro's administration and Maduro's regime was taking political prisoners. Not a good guy. He cozied up to narco terrorists. He basically Venezuela became a narco terrorist state. He was allowing the sort of resources of a nation to be used by cartels and on behalf of cartels. It's a huge problem. And basically everyone who's anyone in the world of terrorism had that as an open ground for training. It was like what Afghanistan was pre-2001. It was like, hey, you got a little terrorist group, you need a place to train, you want a place you're not going to get hassled. Oh, and nice proximity to America. Yeah, come on over to Venezuela here. We got a spot for you. And, all the resources that are there besides oil, Russia and China, they had their people all over that place. I mean, the night that Maduro was taken, there was an envoy from China that had come to meet with him. So this is a problem. It's not so much about just the drugs, right? That's part of it. Venezuela is a huge exporter of illegal drugs, particularly into the United States. It's not just about the oil. It's definitely about the oil, but it's not so much that we need the oil. It's that we want to deny that to our adversaries. We want to weaken our adversaries by taking away something that is critical to them being, capable of messing with us. So I think, like I said, it kills a lot of birds with one stone. We've done this before. You've seen us do regime change in Iran. You've seen it in Chile. You've seen it in Guatemala, Libya. I mean, I would argue World War II even was a regime change, right? Like, we were trying to take Hitler out of power and defeat his regime. It's happened a lot. Of course, we partook in regime change in Iraq, and that was kind of a mess. Now, I'm somebody that fought in Iraq, right? Like, that directly impacted my life. And, I have to live with the fact that now myself and just about every other American looks back on that war and says, yeah, that probably wasn't the right move. But you know what I don't lose any sleep over? Saddam Hussein being taken out of power. I mean, like Maduro, Saddam Hussein was a horrible dictator. He carried out numerous atrocities against ethnic minorities in Iraq. He cozied up to some of the worst people and that, adversaries to the United States, like I don't lose a wink of sleep over the fact that Saddam Hussein at the hands of American forces was captured and at the hands of his own Iraqi people was hung from the end of a rope. Don't feel bad about that at all. Unfortunately, the rest of the execution of the war in Iraq went on for way too long. And to be quite frank with you, we still have people there to this day. And I don't think that's changing anytime soon. Because now I think it's seen as a way for us to have a permanent presence in the Middle East and exert power in the region against places like Syria. And it's probably convenient right now with what's going on in Iran. We're going to get to that. So, this has all happened before, sometimes successful, sometimes not successful. And, I think that we have to address the fact that, the Trump administration ran on really a domestic ticket. They wanted it was America first. It was, we need to take care of things here at home. And that's really why I think he was voted into office, is because people were really frustrated with the way things were here in America, on a variety of different fronts. And when we get into these like new foreign interventions, regime change, things like that, I think it's fair to say like, hey, isn't that kind of getting away from what he said he was going to do when he was running? Yeah, I mean, I think that's a fair criticism, but I'll also point out like, hey, this does impact the middle class in small town America. Like taking Maduro out and exerting control over Venezuela improves life for people in rural America. That's where I grew up. I grew up in the middle of a small town in, Huron, South Dakota, right? Like middle of eastern South Dakota, small farm town. Like I know what has happened in those areas. I know how rural America has been ravaged by drugs, absolutely ravaged by drugs. I know how prices at the pump can impact everything from a family's ability to get to work in a place where there's no public transportation in rural America. You have to drive everywhere. And sometimes you're driving to other towns to get your kid to school and stuff. And if gas goes from, up to $6, $7, $8 a gallon, that's real harm to rural American families, blue collar folks, lower income, middle class folks. And, this makes our energy situation even more secure. It was very secure before. We have plenty of our own oil. We get oil from a lot of other places too, but now this is a little bit more into the mix. It's only going to further drive prices down. And I think last time I looked at the pump, it was like $2.86 a gallon, which not too shabby. I mean, I kind of, in my personal view, anything under $3 is like, good price for gas, and so it potentially goes down even more, takes a chunk out of the cartel's ability to infuse drugs into this country and particularly rural America. And, I think it's going to have potentially good economic impacts. So overall, this was, I think, a win for people here in America. You know who else it was a win for? Venezuelans. Have you seen the footage? Venezuelans in this country and all over the world, they are crying and dancing in the streets. They are so happy. I am so happy for them. I'm a big believer in a people's ability to pursue life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. I think that representative democracy, the ideals of a republic, should be America's greatest export. I think hope should be our greatest export. See how good we have it in America, and we have a representative democracy. No, we're not perfect, but man, we got it really good, all things considered. We want everybody to have that hope and that opportunity and just everything that comes along with that. And that's been denied to Venezuelans for 25 years now. Now they wake up. They woke up this week with a new hope that maybe the ones that aren't home can go home, and the ones that are still in Venezuela, that maybe they're going to have a better life going forward. This is huge. This is huge for them. I'm happy for them. Even if you don't think the United States should be involved in everything, okay, fine. But I am happy for Venezuelans that they have a new day and that they are excited about this. To me, that really plays into my calculus behind, yeah, I support the fact that we went in and grabbed Maduro. Now, I think it's completely fair to also question executive overreach in this. But I will remind you that this has not been an issue just with Trump. Okay. You have to recognize, like, if you're upset about Trump exerting executive power to go in and conduct regime change and military operations in and around Venezuela, if you're mad about that and think that that's executive overreach, then you also have to recognize that since the 2001 National Defense Authorization Act, which included an authorization for use of military force in response to 9/11, that AUMF has been abused by every president since. It was abused by Bush Jr. It was abused by Obama. It was abused by President Trump the first term. It was abused by Biden. And it's, I would argue, being abused again in Trump's second term. Every president since 9/11 has abused that AUMF and used it to justify foreign interventions around the world, not just Afghanistan. So it's fair to say, hey, we're concerned about executive overreach. And to that, I will say, hey, you know how you rein in executive power and executive overreach? You know that co-equal branch of the government, the legislative branch, Congress? Hey, get off your asses. Start holding presidents accountable. Not just President Trump, every president before and after. Presidents, by virtue of what they do, are going to try to wield as much power as they can. They're going to try to collect as much power and influence as they can within the executive branch. Your job in the legislative branch is to provide a counterbalance to that. There is a system of checks and balances in this country between the executive branch, the legislative branch, and the judicial branch, and it is imperative that each branch of the government takes those extremely seriously, because it is the bedrock of our government, of our freedom. We need those checks and balances. And so, Congress, what are you doing? I mean, you've been passing the buck on this since the early 2000s. You've been letting presidents run roughshod around the world with our military using the 2001 AUMF as the justification. Do your jobs. Okay? And there's plenty of people in Congress right now who have been around since that 2001 AUMF. Do better. Okay? Like I said, I'm in support of the fact that we went and took Maduro out of power, but I also recognize that executive overreach is something we need to keep an eye on and actively counter, not just with this administration, but every administration. All right. And the other valid concern that I think is out there is, hey, me personally, I still want a little bit more information on what's next. Now, I don't expect to get some classified briefing on what we're doing in Venezuela, but I do expect some broad strokes accountability to the American public on, hey, when we say we're going to run Venezuela for a while, well, what do you exactly mean? Who's doing what? What exactly are we responsible for? And all of that. And how do we prevent this slipping and sliding into a situation where all of a sudden the 82nd Airborne is jumping in to take an airfield in Venezuela, and we've got the 4th ID doing presence patrols around Caracas, and all of a sudden we're in the middle of another insurgency quagmire, right? It should be noted, Venezuela is not Iraq, okay? There's not this Sunni Shiite schism, the religious tensions and all of that. It is, as you've heard people say, a homogenous people, so that reduces the chances of all-out civil war happening, but it doesn't eliminate them. And I want reassurances that we're not going to get into another protracted forever war that costs the blood of Americans, young Americans, and our treasure in this United States. And even if we were to say, hey, we need to have a bigger military presence there, again, I think I would be against that. But if we did, okay, what are the defined success criteria? What is winning look like? What does winning look like? Right? Like, what are the criteria to win that? What is the outcome that we desire from intervening in Venezuela? I need more details on all of that. So, I mean, taking Maduro out, good, great, amazing. Let's keep a check on executive power. And hey, Trump administration, let's get a little bit more detail on what we're going to do now that we did take Maduro out of power. Would love some more clarity there. Okay, so the last thing that I'll say on that is Man, I just got to take a little drink of coffee here. We got the owl mug tonight. I got a family of owls that lives in my yard. They're amazing. Keep the pests at bay. Love listening to them in the summer with the windows open. They hoot all night. It's amazing. Got an owl mug. Still need to up my coffee game, but it's doing the job. Last thing I'll say on Venezuela. Everybody that you talk to, Republicans or Democrats in Congress that got the briefing on this, anybody that knows anything about military operations, looks at what the military did to pull this off and is extremely impressed, as they should be. This will go down, and rightly so, as one of the greatest helicopter raids in history, in world history. It's one of the most daring military operations of the 21st century, for sure. The level of coordination and rehearsal that was required to do this with no American lives lost. There's about a half dozen guys that got injured, I believe, and there was some damage to a helicopter. But the fact that we got out of there without like some sort of 1993 Mogadishu Black Hawk Down sort of situation is pretty incredible. And I can't give the military enough credit for what they did. Everybody from Cybercom doing their thing. I'm sure the CIA and NSA were also getting busy in there to enable this. And then every branch of the military took part. I mean, just hats off, guys and gals. Like that. That's some impressive stuff. And it rightly should strike fear into the hearts of any adversary we have out there about what we're capable of. And then a special thanks to the guys on those helicopters, the guys that were actually boots on the ground doing that raid. These are some of the best that we have in our United States military. They are the best in the world at what they do. Okay. I don't know who specifically was on that, like individual names of people or whatever, but I've got more than a few people that I know in that organization that I kind of wondered to myself, I wonder if he was on this, good on him. I mean, just for the guys that did get to go on this, just so you know, this is like a once in a lifetime, like this is a history making operation. And there's thousands of people that will serve in special operations in any given year, and they will not get the opportunity to perform a mission of this magnitude. So for the guys that got selected to perform this mission, they would have been very excited. And the pressure, of course, was going to be enormous to get it right and not embarrass the United States. I mean, I'm sure that was never even a thought that crossed their mind, but like the pressure was enormous and they stood up to the challenge. And you just think all those rehearsals they were doing going all the way, back a couple of months, I believe they've been rehearsing this. They built a compound that reflected the one that Maduro was in, and just rehearsed and rehearsed and rehearsed over and over and over again. And just imagine getting the final go and you're boarding these helicopters. I mean, I can just feel the exhaust of the helicopter on my face. I can hear the beating of the rotors, that lift off. If you were on one of the 60s, riding in a door, feet dangling out over the ocean and then over the Venezuelan jungle. The guys in the 47s just looking out the back, that crew gunner for the 160th Special Operations Aviation Regiment looking out. And then as you get closer to Caracas, you start seeing the horizon light up from all the, gun runs and bombs that were being dropped on sites that could potentially threaten the assault force. And just seeing that, I bet those crew gunners probably had to open up a few different times, and those guys sitting in there, they're getting amped up. They're a little bit nervous, but mostly excited. And like, this is what I was fucking born to do. The envy of everybody in special operations, the envy of anybody that's ever wanted to do something great on behalf of their country, at least in a military sort of capacity. And they were the ones that were there. And then at some point, as you're getting close, they give out the 1 minute call and that finger gets held up and you start doing little checks and just reassuring yourself like, hey, I've already checked my kit 1,000 times. I'm going to check it one more time. I'm ready to go. Start adjusting yourself a little bit because it was probably a long flight. And you start getting yourself ready, stretching the muscles a little bit, adjusting yourself in the helicopter. And then the 30 seconds call. The 30 seconds call comes out. Now you're finding your safety line. You're checking everything one more time, and you feel those helicopters just seconds later start to flare and either land, or I don't know if they roped or they landed, but either way, it's right out. It's landing on the X, and then it's a sprint through that. And they killed, it sounds like, up to 80 or 90 Cuban security guards. Like those Cuban security guards, they didn't stand a fucking chance. Like, these are the best shooters on earth. Incredibly competent. And I have seen these guys clear buildings, conduct close quarters combat in person. I'm telling you, there is nothing like it. It's nothing like you've even seen in the movies. They are so fast. They run through buildings. It's incredible to watch. It's incredible what they are capable of. The most competent force on earth for something like this. And they got their guy, they got jackpot. They got Maduro. They went and grabbed a sitting, although illegitimate, but a sitting president of a foreign nation out of his own fucking house and brought him back to the United States to face justice. That's awesome. That is fucking cool. In the dead of night, I think they were on the ground for no more than 30 minutes. The whole operation took less than 3 hours. Like, these guys are pros, professionals. Really, really impressive. Hats off to those guys and everybody that supported that mission. Extremely impressive. All right. Another quick sip of coffee here. We are cruising right on to Iran. Hoo boy. There is a popular uprising going on there. I don't know if you've seen any of the clips on social media of what's going on there, but they are in the middle of a very fast expanding nationwide protest that began on December 28th, actually, 2025. And it started as economic demonstrations because they've had a sharp currency slide. Like the real is, I believe that's what they call their currency, the real. The real has been in just free fall. Inflation has gone through the roof. Cost of living has become untenable. People have gotten just pissed off at the regime in Iran. And it's, morphed into this just total anti-regime revolution, basically, that is happening right before our eyes. And it's not coming without cost either. The last statistics that I've seen were that up to 65 people have been killed, 2,311 have been arrested, and protests have been recorded at 512 locations across 180 cities in 31 provinces. So this is not just happening in Tehran. It is happening all over the country. It is a massive revolution. I've seen videos of women burning their hijabs. There's literally flamethrowers being used. I've seen views of very brave Iranians just charging at Iranian security forces that are trying to rein them in. I mean, there's a lot of bravery happening right now, a lot of courageous actions being taken, all in the name of pursuing freedom. Pursuing freedom. And again, just like Venezuelans, I am happy for these Iranians. I hope that very soon they will be able to wake up and know that they are fully free to pursue life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That they are going to be able to establish maybe a representative government of some sort. They'll be able to establish a constitution that's fair for everybody. I hope that they get that. And this is something that, ever since I watched this, so Anthony Bourdain, right? Anthony Bourdain was one of the biggest influences in my life. I put him right up there with Hemingway and Ernie Pyle as far as people that have influenced my career trajectory and who I aspire to be like, right? And there was a Parts Unknown episode that Bourdain did in Iran, and one of the local guides that he had, I think it was a local journalist, but she took them around and was very transparent about life in Iran. I don't think she was like openly talking shit or anything like that, but she was very honest, I think. And then you get to the end of the show, after seeing how wonderful Iranian people are, and I've read this elsewhere too, that the Iranian people are amazing. They're not the death, majority of them are not the death to America, all that sort of people, right? Like, that's the people that are in support of the Ayatollah, the supreme leader, Ali Khamenei. If I'm saying that right, that guy's horrible, right? Like, he's like, just like Maduro was horrible for his people, Khamenei is horrible for Iranians, and it's been really bad for a long time there for people, and they've been oppressed by this regime. And when Americans think about how Iranians hate America, it's not most Iranians; it's the government and the people that support the government, which are in the very small minority. And you know, I just want you to know that most Iranians are normal, amazing people. And Iran's a beautiful place. I hope if this revolution happens and normalcy and security is restored to that country, that I can be going on vacation to Iran in a couple of years. I sincerely hope for that. I am rooting for them. And, they've got to fight against them. This won't be easy. I have no doubt that we are supporting in any way that we can. I think Trump openly said that, like, he gave like a warning to the Supreme Leader that, like, hey, if you're killing protesters, we're going to intervene. Again, not trying to get into another forever war. Let's be careful with that. But I am all about supporting these Iranians that are revolting against their very oppressive government right now. I'm excited for them. Every time these reels pop up, again, these women that are throwing their hijabs in there, they're burning pictures of the Supreme Leader, like, they are fighting for their freedom. And hopefully soon there will be a new day in Iran. And luckily so. I mean, we already killed one of their top guys, Soleimani, in Iraq he was one of the top Iranian officials that was in charge of all their sort of military security intelligence operations, responsible for a lot of dead Americans in Iraq during our war there. I mean, I specifically remember I was on a counter-Iranian task force on one of my deployments, and specifically going after these guys. The Iranian government exported, technology and resources and money and weapons into Iraq to resist us. And they killed a lot. I mean, I remember they were responsible for the copper-plated EFPs, explosive force projectiles, that were killing a lot of Americans, disabling our vehicles. And basically what these were, imagine like a coffee can with a bunch of explosives packed in, and then a copper plate on top. And they would hang this under bridges and overpasses and angle it downward at an angle, so that when convoys pass underneath, instead of an IED blowing up underneath the convoy where all the armor is, this would explode and send a molten hot piece of copper hurtling through the air at the most vulnerable part of a striker or any of these military vehicles, punching a hole right through it and killing people inside. It was a serious problem. So, yeah, I don't have any love for the Iranian government, but I have all the love in the world for normal, everyday Iranian people that just want a better life. Absolutely support that. We'll continue to monitor that. The other thing too is, gosh, if this switches over with the Iranian government and it becomes more stable and an ally of the United States instead of an adversary, like, it's going to do so much for stability in the Middle East. I mean, Iran has been one of the primary drivers of, I already told you about like what they were doing in Iraq back in the day. They are one of the primary drivers of instability across the entire Middle East. We're going to see a much more peaceful region across the board over there, with the Supreme Leader out of power, and hopefully a government that is founded on principles of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, and for the people, by the people styles of government. Hopefully that happens there. Overall, this, like I said before, I want the greatest export America has to be those principles, I want us to be the beacon of hope. I want us to be the model for how to achieve freedom and pursue life, liberty, and happiness in other countries. I don't want to take over the world. I don't want the United States to take over the world, but I do want our brand of democracy and the way we approach a representative government and the freedoms that we have guaranteed in our Constitution. I do want that to catch on anywhere where people are oppressed. For sure, I want that. It's why I support the Iranians against their government. I support Ukrainians against Russia, and I support Venezuelans against Maduro. And I support people anywhere around the world that are fighting back against oppression. As an American, as a Christian, I think that is my duty to support those people. So I'm rooting for them. Before we move over to some domestic policy and move off of foreign policy, there's one more piece here. A note on Greenland. Man, this is not one that I had on my bingo card a couple of years ago, but here we are. So I just want to say I am not against, like, I understand the motivation behind this administration wanting to acquire Greenland and make it a part of the United States as a territory or whatever they, plan to do there. I get it. I understand the strategic position of Greenland. I understand its importance in the North Atlantic. I understand its military advantages that it offers. I understand the resources that are there that would be very important to us. I understand all of that. I understand why we want it. What I do not support is the fact that right now it is owned by Denmark. Denmark is a NATO ally. I do not support a policy of isolationism. I do not support a policy of entertaining leaving NATO and leaving those alliances behind. We are the greatest power on earth, but we still need friends around the world. Life is not going to get better for America if we make enemies out of all of our allies around the world and embolden our existing adversaries because of that. Life is not going to get easier. So I'm a little bit unhappy that guys like Stephen Miller are going on, news interviews, and when asked if he can categorically rule out military action in Greenland to take Greenland, and he won't rule it out, and other comments have been made, that's not acceptable. I don't think military action to take Greenland is acceptable in any context, in any frame of mind whatsoever. Going to war with Denmark, invoking Article 5 and going to war with all of NATO is not, that's not how I see America. That's not who we are. We don't do that. When we acquired Alaska, we bought it from the Russians. The Louisiana Purchase, we bought that. That's not who we are. I know there's if you're insinuating that I'm saying that we only acquire land through peace and diplomacy and purchases and yada, yada, and then you point to the Native Americans, yep, there's a valid point there. We definitely went and conquered the West and like I said, I grew up in South Dakota. I'm all too aware of the atrocities that happened at Wounded Knee and what the Lakota Sioux, among many other tribal nations, have gone through as the U.S. expanded westward. All too aware of that. But generally speaking, we certainly aren't going against our allies to take land. We're not starting wars with foreign nations that were our friends over taking land and resources. There's a better way to do that. If you want to do it, do the hard work on the diplomacy front, make a deal. This, Donald Trump has always said that he is, didn't he literally write a book called The Art of a Deal? I think I might have that. Do I? No, I don't. I do have two other Trump's books, though. I have books from every president that they've written, including Trump. It helps me understand the psyche of our presidents. But I go make a deal. Buy the thing if you need to, or work out some sort of swap, or I don't know. But I don't want to see us going to war with Denmark or NATO over this. That's just an unacceptable outcome for them. And I hate that they're even letting people entertain the idea. They should be categorically ruling that out, even if that puts them at a slight disadvantage. I mean, half the reason I think that they're even saying that is to try to make Europeans scared that they will use military action. Whatever. We shouldn't be doing that. Don't entertain those thoughts. I hate that. Acquiring Greenland, don't have a problem with it. Do it the right way. So that's my note on Greenland. And of course, the people that live in Greenland should have a say. Let's not forget the people that actually live there. There's not a lot of them, but they should have a say in all this. All right, let's move it back over to Minnesota again. We had a incident in Minneapolis during an ICE operation. Renee Good was shot in her car as she tried to drive away, or according to some people, run over police ICE officers. It has sparked outrage and protests across Minneapolis that some are saying are even bigger than the George Floyd protests in 2020. And that was horrible for the city. People are pissed off about this. There's two different ways that this will be viewed, right? There's the legality of that officer taking the shot, and then there's the morals and ethics of it, right? So let's talk about the legality first, because that's really what's going to decide whether the shot that he took was a bad shot or not. It's not going to be my opinion or your opinion. It's going to be decided by legal professionals in the courts and wherever else that goes. Legally, did a little bit of research here. It'll be viewed through the lens of the Fourth Amendment as a baseline. And I looked up the 2023 update to the Department of Homeland Security's policy on use of force. And this is a quote from them, from that document. LEOs, which stands for law enforcement officers, may use force only when no reasonably effective, safe, and feasible alternative appears to exist, and may use only the level of force that is objectively reasonable in light of the facts and circumstances confronting the LEO at the time force is applied. So notably, a lot of people are pointing this out of like, hey, was there no reasonable alternative? Well, that's the objectively reasonable filter. The objective reasonableness is going to be what really decides the fate of that officer on whether he's cleared or charged. And people are going to decide, hey, could you have stepped out of the way? Could you have avoided this? Should you have been standing in front of the vehicle to begin with? Like all of that. They're going to view that legally through, again, using the Fourth Amendment as a baseline and then trying to decide what the objective reasonableness was of the officer's actions that resulted in Renee Good being shot in her car, speeding off and crashing into vehicles. And yeah, really bad situation. Now, that's the legal lens to view it through. I'm not a lawyer. I'm not like an internal affairs guy. I did a little bit of research there just to give some context, but I can't judge that. Where I will judge this, and it's just my own opinion, is through the lens of somebody that, I have personally been in shoot or no shoot situations before. I've had to make that call before. And I think that in this particular situation, after seeing multiple camera angles, after seeing the officer's point of view from the phone he was holding, I believe he was able to see that she was cranking her wheel all the way to the right. And his first thought should have been to step out of the way of the vehicle, to get out of the way as soon as he could. Even if she was trying to ram him, the first thought should not have been to open fire, but to get out of the way for his own safety. Right? And then she would potentially still be alive. Now, Renee Good, and her wife that was out there, were they antagonizing these federal law enforcement? Absolutely. Were they causing trouble? Yes. Were they blocking the road? Yes. Like, I'm not trying to say that there's some, they probably would have and probably should have been arrested if she were still alive, for the way that they were acting out there. But I don't think she should have been killed. I don't think it was safe to kill her while she was behind the wheel of a moving vehicle because it could have hurt other people. There's multiple reasons why most law enforcement officers don't open fire on moving vehicles. So I don't think it was a good choice. I do think he had other options. I think he should have prioritized his own safety first and just got out of the way instead of worrying about drawing his sidearm. And like I said, he could see that she was cranking the wheel to the right. So that means if he takes a step or two to the right, should be good, and ultimately he wasn't injured. And, I have no doubt that officer probably feels like he was justified in taking that shot. Of course he thinks that. Of course he thinks he made the right decision, I assume. But I think just with what I know and what I've seen about it, I think that there was no need to take those shots, and he should have just got out of the way, and they should have pursued and arrested after they were clear of the vehicle. I know a lot of people may not agree with that. Some people may agree with that. I don't know. But I think morally, just because you legally can take a shot doesn't mean you should take a shot. And that's what I talk about when it comes to these shoot, no shoot morals. Just because you can does not mean you should. And if it's decided that he legally could do this, take this shot, and that it was within his the policies that he's governed under and the laws and all that sort of stuff, and it was a legal shot and he's cleared, I will still stand by morally. I think he had an option. I think that American should still be alive today. And yeah, there's what will be decided in the court of law, and then there's the court of public opinion. And I know where I stand in the court of public opinion. And part of the thing with this is I just, generally speaking, whether it's him or any of these ICE and CBP operations, Customs and Border Patrol operations across the country, a lot of these guys, I've seen too many videos now of these guys going back and forth in these verbal fights and antagonizing protesters themselves and going back and forth, and it's just fanning the flames, and then doing things like running after people in Home Depots and Walmarts and things like that. In Minneapolis, pursuing somebody onto the grounds of a high school, and it causes a whole problem. Like, guys, you got to use a little bit more maturity here in your operations. You know, the ground force commanders, or whatever they call them in law enforcement, need to be the level head, reining guys in, because things do get passionate, they do get emotional. Those commanders need to rein them in and say, hey, maybe we shouldn't pursue this guy onto a school grounds that are in session. Maybe we can find a different place to go pick somebody out besides Walmart in the middle of broad daylight, because all it's doing is making people against you. It's going to make life harder for you and all the people that are trying to do good work in all of this. And right now, it's even causing problems for people that have nothing to do with ICE or CBP, like the ICAC officers that were harassed the other day because people thought that they were ICE and CBP. ICAC, if you're not familiar, stands for Internet Crimes Against Children. These guys have nothing to do with customs or immigration enforcement. Nothing whatsoever. They are going after pedophiles, dangerous pedophiles. That's what they do. And they use some amazing technology. You know, I've edited a few news stories over the years about the work that these guys do. They are doing God's work. Like, they are doing things that it doesn't matter what side of the aisle that you sit on. You would agree, like, yes, I am glad there are people in the Internet Crimes Against Children Task Force out there doing the work that they do. It is so, so important. And the fact that they were getting harassed the other day because people thought that they were ICE, like, man, that sucks, you know? You don't want those guys having a hard time. They got a hard enough job as it is. The things that those guys have to see and deal with, and the people that they have to deal with, the evidence they have to look at, it is nightmare fuel. It is stuff that you cannot unsee. Horrible things against children. And they have to wade into that cesspool every day. Excuse me. Everybody's sick right now. Getting over it. So I just, overall, these federal law enforcement agencies, use a little bit more common sense, maybe a lighter touch, be a little bit more strategic with how you're doing things. Turning the entire country against you is not going to make your life easier. And it potentially is going to impact midterm elections in a big way, in a way that this administration might not be super happy about. So that's what I'll say on that. You know, it's tough right now in Minneapolis. My heart goes out to them. And, you know, like I said in the last episode, I'm very familiar with that city, the state of Minnesota. I grew up next door in South Dakota. My brother was a paramedic in that city for a long time, dealt with a lot of different things. He covered the George Floyd riots and protests in 2020. Yeah, I hope they get through this. I hope, you know, no harm comes to any more people, whether they're law enforcement or protesters. Like, just, it's a bad situation, and there's ways to make it better. And so I hope those options, those routes are explored. All right. Elsewhere in Minnesota, I want to move on to the culture section. We covered enough news. That was pretty heavy, I know. Talking about football. I am wearing my Minnesota Vikings sweatshirt here. I'm a big Vikings fan. Their last game of the season was last weekend, unfortunately, because they didn't make the playoffs. They finished at 9-8, better than one of the playoff teams playing today. But they didn't win their division. They didn't do good enough to get a wild card slot. Fortunately, they didn't finish last in the division like I thought that they would. The Lions did, which pretty cool. Hey, I'll take better to be anything but last, preferably first, but sucks to be last. So glad that they didn't finish in the bottom of the NFC North. You know, I know not everybody's into sports. I know not everybody's into football and everything like that. But for me, it goes back to when I was a kid. I used to watch it with my dad all the time. It was a moment for us to bond. I literally remember we would go to church on Sundays. There was 2 services on Sundays at the church we went to, the American Lutheran Church in Huron, South Dakota. 2 services every Sunday, one at 8:30 in the morning, one at 11 a.m. Now, my family, I was oldest of 5, big family. There was no way my parents were wrangling all of us to in time to get to that 8:30 service. So we always went to the 11 o'clock service. And you know, that noon football game, it's 1 o'clock Eastern where I live now in New Hampshire, but it's 12 Central. So church started at 11, would get out right at 12. And I remember me and my dad just like power walking to the car in the parking lot, trying to catch kickoff over the radio and listen to the first few snaps or the first drive on the radio as we drove home. And then jump in there, adjust the antennas because we never had cable, it seemed like, and always had to use the bunny ears and tinfoil and all these contraptions, and then watch the game together. Something we really bonded over the years, and all the way up until his final year on Earth. We were watching Vikings games together, and those are really special memories for me. I go all the way back to the 98 NFC championship, and anybody that is a Vikings fan has just immediately got PTSD, especially if you were around back then. That year, the Vikings finished their regular season at 15-1. I mean, they had set the NFL record for most points scored by a team in a single season. Gary Anderson, their kicker, had set an NFL record for not missing a single field goal attempt or extra point attempt. He was batting 1,000. This team had Randy Moss, Chris Carter, Jake Reed. Like, they were Super Bowl favorites. They get all the way to the NFC Championship. They're up 7. They have a chance to put the Falcons away with a field goal, a chip shot. They got the best kicker in the league by a mile. He misses that field goal. Gives the ball back to the Falcons. We're not up 2 possessions anymore, only up by 7 still. They march down, get a touchdown, and now it goes into overtime and they win in sudden death. And the Vikings go home. That would have been the Vikings' first Super Bowl in like 30 years, I think. We haven't been to one since. Just absolutely heartbreaking. Heartbreaking. I remember that. Me and my dad both just like sitting there in disbelief. Like, did this seriously just end? We thought we were going to the Super Bowl. Just absolutely heartbreaking. That was 1998. And then again in 2009, the Vikings made it to the NFC Championship, this time with Brett Favre at the helm as quarterback. And they played the Saints in that NFC Championship game. That was Bountygate, if you remember that. They just beat up on an old man, Brett Favre. I felt bad for the guy. Lost that game, okay. And that was a good team that year. They had a lot of promise. And then again in 2017, or would have been the 2018, but the 2017-18 season. I remember that season. We just had this magic rabbit's foot in our pocket. The team was doing really well. They had the backup Case Keenum in at quarterback, and they were just winning against all odds, and they go into the playoffs. They have a first round bye and go straight to the second round where they play the Saints. The Saints were heavily favored. They weren't expected to win. The Vikings that season, I believe, were kind of seen as kind of a gimmick. But my dad had just died. And of course I was like, of course they're going to go win a Super Bowl right after my dad dies. And he'll have never been able to see it, but it felt like there was magic in the air. And they go to play the Saints again. Comes down to the wire. Case Keenum throws it up on a last-ditch effort to Stephon Diggs. And as Paul Allen said at the time on the call, Diggs, sideline, touchdown. The whole play is the Minneapolis Miracle. Gives me chills right now just thinking of it. I was sitting in a little apartment here in Portsmouth, New Hampshire, just freaking out. I was jumping up and down. I teared up. I started crying a little bit. I'm really proud to admit that, but like, it was emotional. I was generally an emotional mess at the time because my dad had just died, and I wish I was watching that game and experiencing the Minneapolis Miracle right there with him. And because of that Minneapolis Miracle, I was like, this is it. One more game, NFC Championship game against the Eagles, and we're going to the freaking Super Bowl. It's destiny this year. It's finally happening. Minneapolis Miracle happens, going to Philadelphia the next week, play the Eagles, and they absolutely wipe the floor with us. It was ugly. Not even close. No Gary Anderson down to a single field goal moment. They just absolutely destroyed us. by like the second quarter, I was like, yeah, we're not winning this game. This is ugly. Ugh, brutal. And so it's through that, that was the last NFC championship game we went to back in 17-18. We haven't been back since, certainly haven't been to a Super Bowl. We're one of the few teams that have never won a Super Bowl. This fan base, people like me, we've been enduring season after season of having hope, supporting the team, loving the Minnesota Vikings, and just always eventually having our heart ripped out. And it's rough. This season, hey, they salvaged the season and they finished with a respectable record, and I give them kudos. But it's also really sad, We've got two players that have been with the Vikings for a long time. They're two of my favorite players. One, Harrison Hitman Smith. He's one of the safeties for the Minnesota Vikings. He was drafted by the Vikings 29th overall in the first round. And he's played since then in 208 NFL games. 208. And he started every single one of them as a Minnesota Viking. Every one of those 208 games in the purple and gold. He's a six-time Pro Bowler. He's got 21 and a half sacks. He's got 39 interceptions. And he's an amazing human. He's a good dude. He quarterbacks the defense under Brian Flores as the defensive coordinator. And man, they had a stout defense this year. They had a championship caliber defense this year. And I just hate that Harrison Smith will never have. He's a Hall of Fame worthy safety. He should be considered for the Hall of Fame, and I'll be real disappointed if he doesn't make it into the Hall of Fame at some point. If he had a Super Bowl, he would be a shoo-in. And it's just a shame that a guy that has had such a great career and is such a good person won't be able to get that ring, because it looks like he's probably going to retire after this season. He hasn't made the announcement yet, but all signs point to he played his last game. And then there's the other guy, CJ Ham. He's a fullback. He was actually an undrafted free agent out of Augustana College in Sioux Falls, South Dakota. Not exactly known as an NFL producing powerhouse of a college. That was back in 2016. Made it onto the practice squad and just worked his way up from there. Since then, he has played 141 games as a Minnesota Viking. He's a two-time Pro Bowler, and he was a Walter Payton Man of the Year nominee. And by all accounts, everybody that knows him, has played with him, met him, he's a good dude. Genuine human being, just awesome guy. He plays a critical role on the Vikings offense. He's one of the rare fullbacks in use in the modern NFL, but he's just absolutely critical on blocking and doing all the different things he does to support the quarterback and the offense every game. Fortunately, this last game, again, it looks like he's probably retiring after this season. And I was really happy for him that this last game that he played, he did punch it in for a touchdown. He got a running touchdown in his what may be his final NFL game, and that was really special. So, I like I said, just another guy that I'm bummed he'll never get that Super Bowl ring. I'm going to be a little bit sad next season if the Vikings take the field without those two guys on the roster. But it is what it is. Everybody retires at some point. They had a great career, and they've got a lot to be proud of. And I've enjoyed rooting for them. They've been amazing people. As far as next season goes, I've got a lot of optimism for the future. I always do as a Vikings fan. This year was kind of a surprise because the year prior we'd finished 14-3, and yeah, we had kind of a rookie quarterback coming in and JJ McCarthy, but all the other pieces seemed to be there. And through a series of injuries and a carousel of, 3 different quarterbacks that played over the course of the season, just not enough things went our way. And I think we were a half game out of the playoffs. That sucks. So hopefully we can right the ship next year. I'm going to be right there next year. The Vikings play the Patriots next year in Foxborough, so it's going to be right down the road for me. I'm going to try to make it to that game. I don't know. I'm going to have fun. I'm going to keep watching. And now I watch these games with my daughter. As she's gotten older, started to get into it. And I feel like I'm creating those same moments that I did with my dad now with me and my daughter. And that's pretty special. That's pretty cool. Sports bind us together. Rooting for a team gives you commonality with a lot of other people. There's so much division going on. Sports are something that we can come together around. And yeah, you might, hate the other people, like fuck the Packers and, all that stuff gets said. But like, we're all football fans. We all love Sundays. We all love the thrill of the game. We love the way it brings us together with our friends and families. my wife makes this amazing dish. She has this amazing wing sauce recipe that she uses, and when she makes wings on Sundays, it's chef's kiss, like just amazing. And yeah, I can't wait till next season now. Being out here, I'll continue to watch the Patriots to the playoffs, but I'm already looking forward to the next season watching the Minnesota Vikings. So that's my culture piece this week. I wanted to say a few words about the end of the Vikings season, but now I've got the quote for this week. The first episode I didn't have a quote ready. This week I was not going to make that same mistake. And this quote comes from the TV show The Office, one of my favorite TV shows. It's an amazing sitcom. And if you're a fan of that show, then you know Andy Barnard. Andy Bernard. He's a character played by Ed Helms. And in the series finale, the last episode of that entire show, he said, "I wish there was a way to know you're in the good old days before you've actually left them." Yeah, Andy. I wish there was a way. And I've been thinking a lot about that lately. I want to talk about nostalgia, specifically millennial nostalgia. I was born in 1986. It's 2026. I turned 40 this year. All right. I'm kind of an elder millennial. It's been giving me a lot to think about. And I know everybody has a lot to think about when they start getting into those middle ages. You turn 40. I'm not nervous about getting old. I'm not afraid of turning 40 or anything like that. It's just I've lived so much life at this point that I've now started to look back on it. And some of it I'm nostalgic for, some of it I'm sad about. I've got a few regrets and things that maybe I would have done differently. I don't have any regrets in the way that, like, hey, everything happened the way it did for a reason. I'm where I'm at right now because of all those things, good and bad, that happened. So no regrets in that sense, but definitely some things that I would have, I feel like, done differently, and choices and things. And I just, you scroll on social media now and there's all these accounts, these like retro accounts that are reminding you of what it was like to be a kid growing up in the 90s and early to mid 2000s. And just, as an elder millennial, the world that I grew up in doesn't exist anymore. And I can't help but think about that and dwell on it a little bit. I kind of grapple with everything we've been through as a generation, everything that's going on right now. And then we look back and say, man, I was in high school when 9/11 happened. We had the internet, but it wasn't the internet as we know it now. We didn't have social media. We didn't have all those things. We had these chat things and, AIM and MSN, and we burned CDs and we ran all over town. And even as little kids, we were riding our bikes all over the place, and we could just go and live without fear of judgment outside of our own peer group. We didn't have to worry about the wider going viral on the internet and the whole world seeing our jackassery. And certainly I was responsible for a lot of jackassery back then. Those are some of the best memories. Some of the best memories. I don't know. You go out drinking and the memories that happened. I saw that I think Health and Human Services just removed their recommendation to limit alcohol drinks to 1 to 2 a day, because they said that there's basically alcohol brings people together, and right now that's an element of society we're missing, is that more social aspect. People are too distant with each other, and maybe alcohol would bring more people together. I'm not sure I completely agree with, some people have some serious issues with alcohol, so I don't know that I love not recommending people to have moderation with alcohol, but I absolutely agree with this idea that, some of my best memories, some of my strongest friendships that I have to this day stemmed from many nights as an underage drinker, just getting blackout drunk together in the middle of a farm field or a hotel room or something like that. And I just, we did all of that without worrying about getting in too much trouble. You worried about the cops and getting a minor and things like that, but like, you didn't worry about that you were going to end up on the internet or anything, or on social media. We didn't have to worry about bullying on these different social media apps. It wasn't until my last year or two in high school that most people had cell phones, and they were like the little Nokia, type things. They didn't have cameras and all that sort of stuff. And you had to like You watch how many minutes you used and things like that. I mean, it was a different world, and that world doesn't exist anymore. And, as we have aged as millennials, some of us went off and fought the war of our generation, the war on terror. We went to Iraq and Afghanistan. Others went to college and graduated into a recession and went through some hard times. And then we started raising kids in the middle of a pandemic lockdown. Like, man, it has to some extent feel like it's been one thing after another, and that we've had a little bit of a rough go of it. But I also think that we were raised in a way that we were equipped to take on those life challenges. And we're not unique. Every generation goes through their challenges, right? Just like I remember exactly where I was on 9/11. There's people a generation or two behind me that remember exactly where they were when JFK was assassinated, and a generation behind that knows exactly where they were when the attack on Pearl Harbor happened. So it's not unique. People have been enduring hard lives for forever. And I wouldn't even say my experience as an American millennial, even with like going to war and all that stuff, like it hasn't been particularly hard, not compared to how some people have it in other countries. So, I don't know. It's just been a lot to think about lately. But there's this account I found on Instagram called Stuff That Rules. This guy started it recently, I think. And just every day he posts these reels of him just thinking about the simple things in life, and is like, man, that rules. And I was like, that's kind of a great idea. And as I've gotten nostalgic and thinking about what times used to be like as a young boy, a young man growing up, a young millennial, you know, there's a lot of things that today I look at and I was like, man, that was awesome. I loved that. That at the time I didn't fully appreciate. So I narrowed it down to just 10. I could have given you 30, but I narrowed it down to 10. So here we go. The top 10 things that I think were awesome now, that are awesome now, but maybe I didn't fully appreciate back then when I was a kid. Number 10, being told to go play outside as a kid only to be stuck there all day because your parents locked you out. And I'm talking drinking from the fire hose, not the fire hose, drinking from the garden hose, playing in the dirt, building forts, just peak imagination engaged, right? We were forced to go outside and just be bored. My parents would literally lock the door and not let us in. Like, be bored. Go ride your bike around the block, or sometimes we'd even get permission to ride our bikes down to the ice cream shop that was more like, I don't know, a half mile away or something like that. And it was a lot of fun. And at the time, I kind of hated it. I hated being locked outside and I'm bored. Not like being bored was good for me. I think it's why I'm in a creative field now, is because I was forced to be bored so much and make shit up to do to entertain myself so much as a kid. Number 9, going to freeze frame to rent a movie. Now, for some people, it was Blockbuster and things like that. We didn't have chains like that in Huron, where I grew up. We had this video store called Freeze Frame, and that eventually actually went out of business. And then there was a video store at the grocery store in town that you would go to. But either way, you go to the store and rent VHSs from there to take back and watch a movie. We didn't have Netflix back then. We didn't have smart TVs and all that sort of stuff. You had to go rent a physical copy of a movie. And the thing about it is, like, the really popular movies might have 3 or 4 copies there, but the older movies, the ones that aren't like new Blockbuster releases, they only had 1 copy. If somebody else had that rented out, you'd just put your name on a list and they'd like maybe call you and let you know when it was ready, or you just have to come back over and over again and check if it was there. Yeah, what a way to live. It was annoying at the time. It felt like going to the video store and stuff. And when Netflix first came out, it was like such a novelty. But yeah, I look back on that now and I kind of loved going and browsing the movie sections and taking 45 minutes sometimes just to decide on a movie, browsing those aisles. And then, yeah, that reminder to be kind and rewind before you returned it. Yeah, just a different time. Number 8, playground football in elementary school. There was like the kids that demanded to be all-time quarterback, and then the kids that were like real genuine athletes, and everybody else just running around. And we didn't have flags or anything. It was just 2-hand touch. And man, it was a blast. And, if you went and crushed it during your 10-minute recess, you were kings of the school for the rest of that day, it felt like. And if it was snowing out or something like that, it was just, man, that was fun. Just good old fashioned elementary school fun. I loved that. Number 7, going to Scott's Skate World. And the first time I ever held hands with a girl during a slow song. Scott's Skate World, I think this was a thing everywhere. Ours was called Scott's Skate World, but everybody had a roller rink back then in their town, it seemed like. And it was just this real unique thing. They were most popular in elementary school and maybe like 6th or 7th grade even, but mostly elementary school. And back, when you're that age, you're not having school dances or anything like that. And so at the skating rink, everybody would be out there on like rollerblades, or they'd rent roller skates. And they'd always be playing these fast-paced songs, and you'd be having fun. There's like different games that you would do and stuff like that. But then they'd occasionally put on like the slow song, and then you'd like go and like, you might like a girl or she might like you, and you do that awkward thing, and then maybe both end up holding hands and skating, holding hands with each other a few laps around while the slow song played. And the first time that ever happens, those are those like social skills you develop as a young boy that I guess don't happen as much now. I guess now it's very rare for a guy to go approach a girl in like real life, and it's all done through apps and everything. When I was a young kid, you had to like go ask the girl to dance, or before that you had to ask her to, go hold hands while you rollerbladed. I wasn't super popular with the ladies in elementary school, but I do remember the first time a girl held my hand while we skated, and what a formative time as a boy that was excited to be a young man someday. Number 6, are you going to be on MSN tonight? I remember saying that with my friends, and that was always a thing that people would ask during the day. MSN for us, other people had AOL, Instant Messenger, or AIM. I talked to my wife, and her friends all used AIM. All me and my friends, we used MSN growing up. We all had Hotmail addresses, and that was just like, that was the social thing. Like if people couldn't go out, it was a school night or whatever, everybody would get on their home computer and log into MSN, and you'd chat and stuff, and maybe wait for the girl that you really liked to come on and show her availability and start chatting. And then everybody's dealing with like, their parents or siblings yelling at them to get off the internet because they need to make a phone call, because it was all dial-up internet then. So you just had to, if you wanted to use the phone, you had to be off the internet. And if you wanted to use the internet, you had to be off the phone. So just a special time doing that. Good memories there. Number 5, the DJ putting on that song Get Low during a school dance. And then me and all of my friends, every kid on that dance floor, when it gets to that point of the song, yelling at the top of our lungs in front of teachers, chaperones, and God, from the windows to the walls, to the sweat drop down my balls, and just yelling that at the top of your lungs. I mean, I can't believe we did some of the things that we did. You're all in there like grinding with each other, and just everybody's sweaty, and it's in the high school lunchroom, but you pay the local DJ to come in and put it on, and there's adults there, and they're just watching us bump and grind with each other and play things like Get Low and Baby Got Back. I can't imagine that as a parent now. I would feel so awkward and probably not be okay with it, but like, I would be a massive hypocrite today if I said something to my kids about that, because of the way I acted in high school, in middle school, at those school dances. Like, just absolutely crazy. But man, some really good memories. I mean, we yelled some pretty profane things at some of those dances. Number 4, waiting in line outside the movie theater on opening night of a big movie. Now, today, everybody goes on Fandango or an app somewhere to buy their movie ticket, select their specific seats. So there's not really any lines at the movie theater anymore, not even on big opening nights. That's kind of a thing of the past now. But back when I was growing up, you didn't have these big recliner seats where everybody was nice and separate. You were all kind of packed in there like sardines. And on opening night for a big movie, that line would be like around out the theater and around the block. Like, you'd have to wait in line, and if you wanted to get a good seat, you'd get there really early. I remember there were times that me and my friends would go camp out in front of the movie theater to make sure that we had like a middle, like sort of front row seat in the theater, like those perfect seats that everybody wants. And You just don't have, and it was just this social event. There was so much community involved in that. Even as a young adult, when me and my then girlfriend, now wife, would go to the movies down in Savannah, Georgia. So I remember some of these big releases, and those they had bigger theaters in Savannah than what I had growing up, and they'd have these big lobbies, and those lobbies would just be packed with people, and a bunch of them would be dressed up as characters in the movie and things like that. And there was just this buzz in the air, and there was so much excitement, and then you would all file in. And again, hopefully you got there early enough to get a decent seat. Otherwise, you'd be stuck in like a corner somewhere where it was hard to see. And it just, man, I mean, I appreciate the especially as an adult now with like kids and stuff. Like, I appreciate the fact that I can go sit in a recliner chair there. I appreciate the fact that I can pick my seats ahead of time and I don't have to wait in a line. But man, it was pretty awesome going to the movies on a big opening night back when I was younger. So I do miss that. Number 3, getting into the top 3 now of awesome things that I didn't fully appreciate when I was growing up. Number 3, downloading songs from LimeWire and burning CDs. Yeah, I mean, there was no Spotify, there was no Apple Music or anything like that. You had to go download these songs off of super shady. I mean, and before you could like had LimeWire and stuff like that, a lot of times you'd have to just go buy CDs. And I remember we'd have these like big binders of CDs that we'd take with us on like basketball trips and things like that. And you trade CDs with people. And like, you know, for me, my parents didn't let me have certain music, so I'd always trade with other people to be able to listen to that music on trips and things like that. And then once, you know, LimeWire came out, you know, and people started burning CDs, and you kind of be judged on the mixed CDs that you had and the way you arrange songs. And like, I like music and everything, but I've never been the like really into music guy that knows everybody's name in the band and all these underground bands and things like that. Like, I've never been that guy. But I've got my favorite bands. It just all tends to be more conventional mainstream stuff. It's everything that I like, everybody's heard of, right? And that's how I was as a kid too. And you'd kind of be judged on like the mixed CDs that you had, and you'd be excited when a new show came out, and like half the time not half the time, but a decent portion of the time, you download something on LimeWire, and it would download a virus onto your computer. And again, you've got one computer in the house, it's the family computer, and you just destroyed it with some virus you downloaded while trying to download Get Low by Lil Jon, you know? And then the songs that you did download, you'd always have to hunt for the ones that didn't have like the radio edits on it and like the DJ talking over it for the first 3 minutes of the song and all of that. Like, you wanted to find like a good, clean, unedited copy of the song. That was always a lot of fun too. I think LimeWire, if I remember correctly, on LimeWire, you could see the ratings of each song that you could download to see the quality of it, I think. Maybe I'm making that up. It's hard to remember at this point, but I miss that. Number 2, sneaking out of my parents' house at night to go to a bonfire party in the middle of some farmer's land. Man, like I said, I got into all sorts of shenanigans when I was a kid. It's funny that I run a podcast now called The Marty Party. Because I don't really party anymore. I very rarely drink and things like that. And speaking of, I need a sip of this coffee. But you know, I remember, you know, going to bed, pretending to go to sleep. All the lights are off, the house is locked up, and then I'd sneak out after my parents and everybody was asleep and meet one of my friends a block or 2 away from my house so that my parents wouldn't hear a car pulling up outside our house, and then go drive 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 miles out of town into the middle of some field, get a bonfire going, throwing pallets on the fire and stuff. People pull their vehicles around, a few trucks backed up, and plenty of beer out there, cases of Bud Light and Busch Light and Coors Light. And, you know, somebody would always have a few handles of liquor out there too. And, you know, I'd mix like rum and Dr. Pepper in a Dr. Pepper bottle, or a Jack and Coke in a Coke bottle. And man, we had a lot of fun. It was like I said, they recently changed the government changed the recommendations about not limiting alcohol and everything. Again, I can't with a straight face say that they're completely wrong, because a big part of who I am, and I've got lifelong friends that I have to this day that I used to go get shitty drunk with in the middle of a field somewhere. And we're all professionals now and have serious grown-up jobs and families and kids and all that sort of stuff. But those were formative years, going out there and figuring out somebody to go buy you alcohol. You know, I worked at a bunch of different jobs, and I always worked at these jobs where there'd be older, like adults there. And I'd always talk one of them into going and buying a bunch of beer and alcohol for me and my friends. and taking that out, and just, man, those were really fun times. I thought they were awesome then, I guess, but I really think that I am so grateful for those experiences now. I really am. I didn't fully recognize how awesome those experiences were. All right. The number one thing that I think is awesome now that maybe I didn't fully credit or realize back at the time growing up, disposable cameras and living life unedited. You know, for a long time, it was just those disposable cameras. You had 24 shots on them. You didn't know how they were going to turn out. All sorts of craziness on those, especially at those bonfire parties or house parties, things like that, or sports trips, or Key Club or FBLA conventions, all those different sort of things that you do as a kid. We had all these physical photographs for it, and you wouldn't know how they'd turn out, and people wouldn't censor themselves on it because they knew the only people that would see those pictures are them and their friends anyways. It's not going on the internet. And even once people started to get like those little handheld digital cameras, and things started to get posted to Facebook during college and stuff like that, or MySpace for a while there, you know, it was still, people would just throw up entire albums of photos. They weren't editing them too closely. You'd have all sorts of stuff ending up and getting tagged on Facebook that weren't maybe the most flattering moments and stuff. But people, again, you were only accountable to your friends, your peer group, the people that you knew in real life. That was who you were accountable to. You didn't have to worry about doing something dumb and going viral on the internet, or having the entire world get mad at you about something because you said something dumb or did something dumb in the moment and when you were caught up. And I just, I feel bad for kids today that have to edit their life so much and deal with online bullying and deal with being under the microscope of the world at any given time because everybody's got a camera in their pocket and instant access to the internet everywhere that they go. It's it's sad for them, you know, and I really appreciate now in retrospect the opportunities that I had to just live life and have a good time with my friends and family without worrying anything. And I love that a lot of those memories are preserved on physical photographs that I still have in photo albums to this day. They're not living on the internet somewhere. They won't all disappear if a platform gets deleted or an account gets deleted. I have those photographs, and that's pretty amazing. Like I said, if only you knew you were in the good old days while you were still in the good old days. What a great quote. But yeah, that's I'll quit being so nostalgic now. Like I said, I'm turning 40 this year, thinking about all this stuff. I know I'm not the only one. I'm not the only millennial that's contemplating life and looking at what's already been and what's possibly ahead in these uncertain times. But all that being said, I have one neat thing that I'd like to show you. It's pretty neat. Look at this. Look at this little handwriting cursive notebook that I got off of Amazon. This is awesome because, again, as an elder millennial, I grew up in elementary school learning how to write in cursive. That skill has atrophied greatly. And I realized that the other day when I couldn't remember how a certain letter, like the difference between how to write it in lowercase and uppercase of a certain letter. I'm like, oh my gosh, I really don't know how to write like fluently in cursive anymore. I definitely can read it, but like, I don't know how to write it anymore. So I picked up this notebook and it's just got all these worksheets in here to practice cursive. And I'm really excited about this. Like, this is cool. So yeah. That's what this looks like. It says on the back, improve your handwriting the fun way with 200 plus pages of practice pages filled with cursive alphabets, words, and quotes. Hell yeah. That's awesome. Anyway, that wraps it up for today. Thanks for coming to the Marty Party. Join me again next week. Episodes drop every Thursday, except for this week because I screwed up on a technical difficulty that I should have caught. But usually every Thursday, look for a new episode. If you don't want to miss a single show, make sure you like and subscribe on YouTube. Set that notification bell so that you never miss one of these. If you're on Spotify or Apple or one of the other podcast platforms, make sure you follow. And I appreciate any comments that you leave or any engagement that you give. Even if you think I've got a dumb take on something, let me know. I'm happy to have a good faith conversation in the comments section. I don't think I've got everything figured out. This is a space for me to talk about things that are on my mind. So all that being said, Have a great week, and, well, we'll see you later.
It's a Marty party. It's a Marty party.